Hello everyone, happy holidays. I am Nathan P. Butler. This is my YouTube channel and this is the monthly project update for the end of December of 2017. I started these a couple months ago to tie into the launch of my Patreon over at patreon.com/NathanPButler, and anyone who is a supporter on Patreon, whether we're talking the $1 tier down with the Travelers of the Butler Universe, or perhaps people who are all the way up at the $10 plus tier, which is the nobility of the Butler Universe, or perhaps the denizens in between, you will be able to find your name in the credits as a thank you for supporting the Patreon. So, what we do this time is basically the same thing as in previous times. I'm going to try to be a little more succinct this time, hopefully. But the idea is a quick zip through the different projects that I'm working on, where they stand, what's new since the last update, and things like that. So you can have it as sort of a one-stop shop to figure out what's new in terms of new stuff that I've put out for those who are curious or looking for something else to partake in and maybe haven't checked out one of the different projects I'm involved in yet. First off, I want to welcome two new patrons via Patreon. We have Martin Dahl and EK Entertainment. EK spends a lot of time hopping in on my live streams for Battlefront 2 and is in Australia. Both of them decided to jump on as Travelers through the Butler Universe on the Patreon. So thank you very much. And thanks to everybody else who's part of the Patreon. Since we're at the end of the year, I do want to go ahead and just mention everybody one more time outside of the credits at the end. That's everybody like Benjamin Handelman, the very first Patreon supporter, Chris Locke, Amy Bisson, Andrew Bettis, Aaron Melzak, Brian Snook, Jared Rasher, Robert Medina, Bobby Craig, David Ray, Jason Hunt, Austin Pierce, Jay Mustard, and S.W. Chris. So thank you all for your support. And again, if you want to support me through the Patreon, get some exclusive content and stuff, or get a thanks in a video like this, then you should check out patreon.com/NathanPButler. Now that I've mentioned it a couple of times, I think that's probably enough. So we'll start out with the one that I've been doing the longest, which is the Star Wars Timeline Gold, which I've been doing for basically 20 years at this point. Its 20th anniversary was back in October. The Star Wars Timeline Gold is an annual thing, usually. Semi-annual if I can, but that's very unlikely usually. So expect the next release not to be until sometime next fall, but work has begun on the newest edition. There's a few comic summaries that I added recently, but probably the main thing that's been added is I finally was able to go see The Last Jedi enough times to get a nice, solid sense of all the different plot points so that when I then came home, I could actually summarize the movie in detail and in depth for the timeline. And that gives me sort of a basis to work in things like references from the visual dictionary, and then as I finish reading them, to link in stuff like the stories in Canto Bight and Legends of Luke Skywalker, if and where they connect, and things like information from Bomber Command and that sort of thing. So the movie is now summarized, and all the information for the visual dictionary is on there, and the next step for me is going to be continuing to finish reading Canto Bight, Legends of Luke Skywalker, both of which are really dragging for me. I'm hoping when I get to John Jackson Miller's story in Canto Bight, it's going to perk up, but my God, both of those books are slogs. I just don't care about the characters or stories in them at all. It's really, really difficult. Maybe that's sort of a mercenary Boba Fett kind of spirit about that. But good God, give me something I can care about. But I'm slowly working my way through those. I'm also kind of off to the side. As I'm going through, I'm going and checking my collection. And I'm putting all my collection stuff onto a big Excel file so I can track it, whether it's Star Wars books or comics or whatever. And I'm finding I'm missing a few physical comics that I got digitally, and it just kind of zipped by when it comes to the physical comics, because I order through Things from Another World, and sometimes the subscription process works fine, and sometimes you miss issues that you don't order manually. What the hell, Things from Another World? But suffice to say, I'm catching up and ordering those, but I'm getting this Excel file ready, so my hope is that maybe within about the next year, I'll actually have my entire collection on that file, and then I can share that file with others who want to use it and maybe follow that format to come up with a way to track their own collection. I figure, if nothing else, it'll mostly be for many people deleting stuff rather than adding stuff, so it'll be a little bit easier to work with rather than trying to add your own information for everything in your collection, assuming you collect the books, comics, and stuff like that. So, working on that every now and then. I think I've got one more long box of comics out of 6 to get on there. The books are all pretty much on there, but then I got to go through games, video game, tabletop, and otherwise, home video stuff, which oddly is not something I put a checklist on that for, because it's already in the book. And slowly but surely, I'll have that ready, hopefully within the next year to share also, probably through the Timelines page, most likely. And I guess I should say, when I say page, I mean the Facebook page, facebook.com/swtimelinegold. The posts to there actually simultaneously post also to Twitter at swfanworks. That's my Twitter, but I almost never use it for anything but just reposting what's on the timeline page. So if you're on Facebook, timeline page is the best way to go. As far as podcasts that I'm involved with, we've actually had 5 new episodes released since the last monthly update was recorded back on, I believe, November 25th of 2017. So we basically have 2 episodes of Star Wars Beyond the Films, which are looking at the Shadows and Secrets story from the Darth Vader series, the original Darth Vader series from Marvel. That's episodes 226 and 227. We look at the first 3 issues and our non-spoiler stuff in the first episode, and then look at the last 3 issues and talk about the covers in the second episode. And then, of course, we have episode 228, which is me and Mark taking on the topic of The Last Jedi, sort of our first impressions, our discussion about that. Surely there'll be more discussion about it as we go along, as we read more books relating to it, as it hits home video and so forth. But the initial Star Wars Beyond the Films reaction and discussion on The Last Jedi is up. It is, again, episode 228, and you can find that podcast on StarWarsReport.com. Also on StarWarsReport.com, you'll find the other podcast I'm involved with, which is Cloud City Casino, where me and Michael Morris talk about Star Wars gaming. Well, just recently we had the release of episode number 77, but it was such a long discussion, it was actually cut into 2 episodes, 77.1 and 77.2. And these are basically about the Battlefront campaign. So, talking about Battlefront 2, talking about the campaign, how the story mode differs from the campaign mode, how the progression differs, what we thought of certain story points, and since both of us have read Inferno Squad, talking a little bit about how it links to that book and otherwise. So if you're interested in what we thought about the story mode, which, has expanded since then, but the story mode from Battlefront 2, then check out Cloud City Casino episodes 77.1 and 77.2, also at StarWarsReport.com. As far as planning ahead for both of those, I would say that you can expect the next episodes we record for Star Wars Beyond the Films to be our year-in review, which is usually a 4-parter. There's one about the books, there's one about the comics, there's one about sort of the games and whatnot, and there's one about the movies and TV and such. So those will be probably the next 4 episodes, probably spread out over a couple of months. Just depends on us recording them. We have not recorded them yet. And then for Cloud City Casino, we're going to need to be talking about the in-depth multiplayer stuff for Battlefront 2, and I'm assuming we're probably going to have an episode with reactions to The Last Jedi. In that case, we're a little behind what we would have liked to be as far as schedules, because Michael is a postal worker, and we're in the Christmas season. So until the last couple of days, his workload has been insane. So now that it's calmed down, hopefully in the near future we'll be able to record those thoughts on multiplayer for Battlefront 2 and its expansion, the free Season of the Last Jedi stuff, and a chance to talk about The Last Jedi. But it just depends on when we get a chance to record it. I did also, by the way, recently record a segment with Brock, if you're familiar with Brock from Star Wars Action News and Republic Forces Radio Network, who was also a guest from time to time on Rebels Roundtable when we were doing it for Star Wars Report. I got a chance to record with Brock for a segment on a year in review about the books, mostly books, a little bit of comics, a little bit of games, but mostly books, for Star Wars Action News. So when they put out their year in review episodes, keep an eye out for the books section, because that'll be one that I did with Brock. It's kind of become a yearly tradition to do that. And I should thank them, by the way, so thank you to Arnie and Marjorie and Brock and all of them, that when they did their holiday buying guide recently, right before, Black Friday and all of that, they took the time to include this. That's right. A Saga on Home Video, a fan's guide to U.S. Star Wars home video releases. My book that came out in May made the cut for their yearly holiday buying guide. So, awesome. Thanks, guys, and hopefully, if you haven't had a chance to check it out, you'll get a chance to check it out sometime in the near future. It's available on Amazon. There's information about how to reach out to me if you want to get a signed copy over on the Patreon page. Just scroll down through the introduction material, and you'll see it down there at the bottom. All right, so the YouTube channel is a place where I have a lot of different things going on. So what's been going on at this point? Well, the biggest thing, and the thing you've been seeing the most, is the Star Wars Battlefront Livestream Podcast, as I call it. Basically a live stream of Battlefront 2 gameplay in which I'm either conversing with people in the chat, or with a guest, or both, or giving a commentary over the game while also speaking with people in the chat. Just depends on how it's working. Again, called a podcast not because it's an MP3 file or something like that delivered through a podcatcher, but because this live stream is more in a vodcast or podcast style, and it's more about the discussion than it is about the gameplay itself. So that's been going on for a while. I've had Jim Perry on a couple of times as a guest, Indiana Jim of the Star Wars Survival Guide. And I'll probably be doing more of that in the near future, just not really sure when. Probably sometime in the first few days of January is more than likely when I'll be getting back on there for more live streaming with that. And of course, we have From the Star Wars Home Video Library, my flagship series here on the channel lately. And for that, recently had episode intermission number 6, in which I talk about fan restorations and fan projects like the despecialized editions, the silver screen edition, and things like that, because people kept asking and asking and asking about it, so I figured I might as well give it an episode. We also had episodes recently on the UK Steelbook trilogies from 2013. That was episode number 130 of From the Star Wars Home Video Library, and then episode 131 covered the different holiday reissues that were released at Walmart in the US that all come with a special Forces of Destiny Volume 1 bonus DVD. So if you're looking for those or curious about those, check out From the Star Wars Home Video Library. Also did some live streaming recently of PlayStation VR games, most notably Doom VFR, including one to show you how to get access to some of the classic levels that you can play that are like the games from the 90s. Of course, the Fantasy Flight Games reviews continued, or content overviews, if you want to call it that, continued. We had the recent release of Waves 12 and 13 of the X-Wing Miniatures game, so I have quick looks at all 5 of the products from those 2 waves. It was a 3 in one wave and 2 in the other, but they're all covered in separate videos in case you want to check out any specific products. Those are my X-Wing Miniatures game content, I would say part whatever. So these are part 64 through 68 of my coverage of the X-Wing Miniatures game. Also, on my vlog, I recently provided 3 different vlog episodes, numbers 20, 21, and 22. Number 20 is basically about my reaction to the whole Disney-Fox deal that's going on, and hearing that The Last Jedi is apparently going to be out in 4K for home video next year. And then episodes 21 and 22 are my reactions to The Last Jedi. Having seen it one time at that point, we have spoiler-free thoughts in episode 21 and spoiler-filled thoughts in episode 22. Again, of my vlog, The Voice of Reason, or lack thereof. Also here on the YouTube channel. But yeah, by and large, lots of good stuff happening on the YouTube channel. Lots of new content up there. There is more still to come in the near future. At this point, we're at a bit over 1,100,000 views total, and we're nearing, slowly but surely, the 4,000 subscriber mark. We're over 3,800 right now, and that is without a lot of, hey, don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button kind of crap coming from me, because I've always found that kind of a tacky thing to do. As for what's coming up, I'm looking over at the side of the room here, where I've got just a pile of stuff to cover. I've got some fandom documentaries we're going to be taking a look at From the Star Wars Home Video Library that may or may not be fodder for future editions of the book. Probably not, except maybe in a general sense. But stuff like People vs. George Lucas, Jedi Junkies, Prequels Strike Back. I've got some Japanese Laserdiscs to show in the near future once I get a chance to really examine them and their content. Got an odd one that was sent by my buddy Jerry from Republic Forces Radio Network and such, which is Bart Wars. It's a Simpsons DVD with a Star Wars theme to it, though we'll find not much in the way of actual Star Wars-based content. Just little things like that to go through and show you there. And at this point, I've also got several sets of new stuff, like Ascension's newest collector's edition for the 4th year, where I really want to get back to that Nate's Favorite Deck Building Games video series to catalog more of that stuff. If for no other reason that then I can take those things and store them away when I'm not playing them instead of having them sit out on our living room table waiting for videos to be made. And of course, all those things are publicly available. We're talking either StarWarsFanWorks.com/timeline or StarWarsReport.com or YouTube.com/ChronoRadio. We're talking about stuff that anybody can get to. But for those who follow the Patreon, we also have some exclusive content that's been released since the last one of these updates. For those who are considered nobility of the Butlerniverse, that's that highest tier on Patreon, we did have our second exclusive Q&A get released on December 5th. Coming up, at the beginning of January, I'll be recording the third of those exclusive Q&As for that highest tier. So if you're in that highest tier, make sure you drop by the Patreon. Again, patreon.com/NathanPButler. Make sure you go there and get your questions into that question collection thread so that I can use them to do that Q&A for you for the month of January. Then, of course, we also, for those who are in the denizens of the Butlerverse or nobility, so second tier on up, we had 2 new audio commentaries released this month. We had an audio commentary I released for the Clone Wars Ambush and for the Clone Wars Rising Malevolence as we go through the Clone Wars in chronological order. Those are commentaries, at least for the Clone Wars 6 and 7, for those who are keeping track. And, of course, we also had last month that extra one for Forces of Destiny Volume 1, which is the thing that's now on home video thanks to Walmart with that exclusive disc and everything. So it's actually the 7th and 8th of the commentaries that have been released, though the 6th and 7th specifically for the Clone Wars. And, of course, coming up on January 1st, we'll see Shadow of Malevolence, and then later in January we will have Destroy Malevolence. So 2 commentaries per month continuing as planned there on the Patreon. And I guess lastly, for those who are curious, the car situation has finally calmed down. Things are getting back to normal. We were able to replace my totaled, it actually turned out it was totaled, my totaled 2013 Kia Rio 5, which I dearly miss, with a 2018 Kia Soul. So, you know, the one that from the back looks like Phasma. So that's cool. You know, finally got that taken care of. And things are kind of calming down because we're in the middle of what is basically a holiday break for, you know, about 2 weeks here in late December, early January. So I'm hoping to get in some more time on projects like the timeline and stuff like that in this little gap. And I'm sure somebody's going to ask, so let me show you here so I don't wind up showing you in another video. For those who are wondering what this is a popcorn bucket from the Cinemark theater chain in the U.S. that I picked up when I went to go see The Last Jedi on the second run-through out of the 3 from when I went to the theater to actually see it. I am firmly convinced now, by the way, that the reason why they're not putting out novelizations immediately at this point like they used to, heck, they used to put out the novelizations shortly before the film and spoil the thing, but I am of the firm belief now that the reason they're not putting novelizations out immediately is so that anyone who wants to re-experience the film or remind themselves of the story of the film has to go back and see it in the movie theater. Same reason they don't put it out on home video immediately after theatrical release. They want you to go back and see it again. I think the same thing's happening with the novelization. So it took me 3 times of seeing it to feel confident to summarize it for the Star Wars Timeline Gold. But dang it, it's done, and I plan on doing more work on the timeline and finishing up reading more books for the timeline here within the span of the next week. That's one of my main foci in the upcoming days here. So with that, we'll wrap this up. Thank you for your interest. Patreon supporters, thank you very much for your support. Be sure to check for your name in the credits there at the end of the episode, and I'll be back for the nobility of the Butlerverse here within a few days, probably about a week, give or take, before we get into that January Q&A, that exclusive for them. Of course, if you're following the Patreon, expect the first of the commentaries for January to come out around January 1st. And beyond that, new content will just keep rolling along through these channels as it's being produced. So thank you very much for your interest. As always, may the Force be with you. Have a good rest of the holiday season and a Happy New Year. See you again in 2018.